Okay. If you would turn to the book of 1 Samuel to the last chapter, chapter 31. We're going to be closing out our study on this series we've been in tonight. The title of it's been Israel Wants a King. We've been primarily studying about King Saul, and then David, of course, being part of that story. Of course, we had to go through his story also, and because they intertwine with each other. And but tonight, or for our last time, if you remember, I guess the last two times really, the Philistines and Israel both were about to fight. The king of the Philistines had sent David away. David had joined up with him, and the king had entrusted him enough that he had given David and his band of men. There was 600 men with David, and plus their wives and children and all their animals and whatever else they owned. He had give them a city over there, a small town, and David and he's got two wives at this point. While he's off at the battle or preparing for the battle with the king, the princes or lords, whatever you want to call them, of the Philistines don't want David there. They don't trust him and his men because they are of Israel. So the king sends them back. When they get back, they find out that their wives and children and all their belongings have been taken hostage, and they let me make sure I pronounce this right. Amalekites are the ones who came and took everybody hostage, and they have taken them off. David and his men follow them and get them all back. The Lord promises him that he'll get them all back, and they do. They bring them all back. The city has been burned. They begin to prepare for a new life, basically there. That's where they're expecting to stay. But David and his men decide to go back into Israel, and they begin to make friends with some of the people in the tribe of Judah, which David is a part of. He brings some of the spoils that they have taken from the Amalekites and gives it to the elders of the tribe of Judah. And as I mentioned last time, we'll see, or well, we won't see, but if you were to continue to read on in David's story, you see where it pays off. In other words, these elders begin to fall in behind him and accept him as the king of Israel. So we won't get into that in this study. That's a study for another time. Now, tonight, we're going to look at the death of Saul. And it's not just Saul, it's his three sons are killed with him in battle. Actually, Saul is wounded in battle. His three sons are killed in battle. He winds up killing himself because of his wounds and the fact that he doesn't want to be captured by the enemy. And in that day and time, that was probably a wise thing. We think people argue about whether Saul should have killed himself or not. Some say, it's blatant suicide, but this is a different matter, a different circumstance. He wasn't over depression or anything like that. It was the fact that he didn't want to be tortured by his enemies. And that would have been the common practice in their day. If the Philistines had found Saul alive, even if he was wounded, more than likely they would not have killed him right away. They'd have took him back to either back to back home to the Philistines and paraded him around and tortured him, or they put him out in front of the battle where the Israelites could see him in full view and tortured him there. He knew what was possible, what was coming, and so he chose to kill himself. No mention at all of Saul's salvation. We've not seen any of that. We've seen where the Lord talked with him at times, at least through Samuel, and or whoever the priest was at wherever he was at. The Lord would come to him at times and speak with him, but no mention of his salvation. And I went through this study more in depth than I probably ever have, and I with an open mind in this, because I've had people tell me, well, they thought Saul was saved because the Lord had been with him, but there's no indication of that here. If you read all this Saul's whole story, you see nothing mentioned about his salvation, and the fact that the Lord put a evil spirit upon him, possessed him, is what it means when it talks about that. A man of God could not have that done. God wouldn't do that to his own people. He may have a evil spirit persecute us, but not possess us. Also, we saw where he went when he gave up on the Lord at one point and went to the witch at Endor, a wicked person, someone that according to his own law should have been killed or run out of the country, one of the two. And he confided in her and tried to bring Samuel back from the dead to talk with him. All signs that Saul was not a saved man. Now at his death, nothing at all mentioned about his soul, whether he went to heaven or hell. Doesn't tell us. So in chapter 31, verse 1, it says, "Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa." So they're in Israel, in the country of Israel. They're in their on Israeli grounds where they're fighting on Mount Gilboa, and the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. So there's they chased, they saw Saul and his sons, and they purposely went hard after him. The reason was, I believe, is because in their day, if you can slay the king and his bloodline, those who would inherit the kingdom, you can degrade. It's a morale degrading of the kingdom. People in the kingdom would give up, and the Philistines could come in and overthrow the whole nation and take over. That would be the plan for that. So, and the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melchishua, Saul's sons. So all of Saul's sons are killed here, even Jonathan. Jonathan, I believe, at least Jonathan was a saved man. I don't know about the others. If you read, you remember what we studied about Jonathan and David. They were best friends and often talked about the Lord together. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. So he's wounded in battle. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, "Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. So he tried to get his armor-bearer to kill him. And when that man, and of course that man was his most honorable servant. He'd been with him for a long time as his armor-bearer. He wouldn't do it, and that's how you would act, that's how you would expect that man to act. But Saul wound up taking his own life. Here he fell upon his own sword. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. And that was probably another wise decision, because with him being Saul's most or closest, the person that was closest to Saul as far as the battle was concerned, his armor bearer, there's probably things that he knew, secrets that he knew about the nation of Israel's army, where maybe even where their positions were, the things that you don't want the enemy to know. And him being a military man himself, I'm sure he was first responsible. The only way I can escape this is death. And so he falls on his sword also, after he sees Saul is dead. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. So all his elite force, all his closest military leaders, military men that were with him, died that day. You remember a few chapters back we saw where Saul had kind of like his Secret Service type men that followed him around. They were his closest, they weren't necessarily leaders in the military, but they were an elite fighting force that protected the king. That's what their job was. Well, all those men have been killed now. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side, Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So they just gave up. They retreated out of the cities there in that area around Mount Gilboa and fled back to safety. All the rest of Saul's army, what was left of it. And it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. Another practice that they had that day, and we think kind of strange today, but if you look back, oftentimes even in recent wars, you see where when an army overthrows another one, they go in and at least try to get their weapons. Soldiers are people too, they'll take mementos, souvenirs, whatever they can get off of the dead bodies. In this case, they're taking weapons, they're taking clothing, whatever they can get that they can use for themselves, or maybe even possibly sell later on. And they found Saul and his 3 sons, found their bodies. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. So they took everything they could off of Saul and his sons. They sent his it says they cut off his head. They stripped him of his armor. Remember his armor, when David fought Goliath, Saul's armor was too big for David. So he was a big man. They took all those things and passed them around the country to show that the great king of Israel, the one that had been persecuting the Philistines for so long, was now dead. They put his armor in the temple of one of their gods, their main god, Ashtaroth. And then they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. They tied his body to the wall out in plain view where people could see that it was true. Saul, the great king of Israel, is now dead. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. Now, these would have been military men. They took them all night to get there and back. They take the bodies, and so not only was the body of Saul there, but also his sons. So the Philistines wanted to make sure their people understood the king of Israel is dead along with his son, so there is no chance at all that any of his heirs are going to take the throne and continue on with what he had been doing. If you remember, Jonathan was a great warrior also, just like his dad was. They took the bodies, it says, and they came to Jabesh and burnt them there. Now, John Gill says in his commentary that this burning was, there's several different possibilities with this. One, of course, it's against the law for the Jews to cremate a body. It was against the law of Moses. But he said that in this case, in certain cases, if the bodies had already become putrid and stank really bad, they would burn, at least burn the flesh off, burn everything but the bones, and then take the bones and bury them. And it appears that might be what they have done here, because he says, and they took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Now, another common practice for the Jews in that day was, it seems like, and it's other places in the scripture it talks about it, where they buried them under a tree, and it was normally an oak tree, because they believed that tree would be there for a long time as a remembrance of that person that was buried there. And they fasted 7 days. Well, a couple of different things along with that. One would be because of the death of the king. Two, they've just handled dead bodies. And if you remember in the law, they had to fast and cleanse themselves so many days after being in the presence of dead bodies. So that's where all that comes from. Now, we're going to read a little bit into chapter 1 of 2 Samuel to finish this story up, and then that'll be the end of it. Now, it came to pass, in 2 Samuel chapter 1, it says, Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had abode 2 days in Ziklag, it came even to pass on the 3rd day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And so it was when he came to David that he fell to the earth and did obeisance. Anyway, this man, his clothes are ripped. He looks like he's had a terrible time. He's got dirt on his face. He's obviously been through a rough time, looks like. And it appears as though David thinks that he's been with Saul, possibly part of Saul's army. And he came to David to give a report of what happened. And David said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he said unto him, Out of the camp of Israel, when I escaped. And David said unto him, How went the matter? I pray thee, tell me. And he answered, That the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead, and Saul and Jonathan his son are dead. And David said unto the young man that told him, How knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan his son be dead? And the young man told him, said, As thou happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariots and the horsemen followed hard after him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me, and he called unto me, and I answered, Here am I. And he said unto me, Who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite, he said unto me again, Stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me. For anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. So I stood upon him, and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. And I took the crown that was upon his head, and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them hither unto my Lord. So, this man obviously is telling a false story, isn't he? He's lying about this. We've already read in the last chapter of 1 Samuel what really happened. This man's story doesn't match what the Lord said. He says that he was the one that Saul had asked to kill him. And he says Saul leaned upon his spear. Well, there's no mention of that. We know he had a sword, but not a spear. Nothing said about that. Now, maybe he did, but nothing mentioned about that. And certainly he didn't call out to him. He called out to his armor bearer, but no one else. And he says he took the crown that was upon his head and the bracelet. Now, unless he was really quick about it and got out of there before the Philistines got to Saul, there's no way he would have got away with that kind of stuff. The Philistines, they would have took that for sure for a prize if they'd have found the crown. And there's nothing said about the crown. It's my understanding in their day anyway, the king most of the time would not wear a crown into battle anyway, for fear of damaging it or losing it. Then David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until even for Saul and for Jonathan his son and for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword. And David said unto the young man that told him, Whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. And David said unto him, How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? There's the question. How were you not afraid to kill the very king of Israel, the one that God anointed? Plus the fact he's an Amalekite. Remember, that's who David just had a battle with. That's who the Amalekites were, the ones who captured David's family, his men's families and all their stuff. That's the ones they went and defeated and got their stuff back and their families back. And David called one of the young men and said, Go near and fall upon him. And he smote him that he died. So they killed this guy because he lied. David questioned him. He didn't have the right answers. And so David had him killed. And then David said unto him, Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. So David has this man killed because he's lied about the king, about killing the king. David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. Now, the book of Jasher, we hear some about that today. What we hear today is false. I'm going to say that up front. There are people out there who want to study the book of Jasher. There's some other books out there. The book of Enoch's another popular one. They're garbage. They're not Bible. They're not Scripture. They were not. They were not ordained of God to be part of the Bible, of His Word. Now there are some true things in them. Don't get me wrong. Some say that they're good history lessons, but this book that he talks about here, and all it takes is a little research. You don't have to do a lot. This book of Jasher that is written, that is mentioned here, is not another book. if you read some of the older commentaries, and John Gill mentions it, and some others mention how that the older Jewish writers in particular, some of them referred to Genesis as the book of Jasher, or certain sections of Genesis, of the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Some say that the book of Jasher is what the Jews would have called the books that Moses wrote, Genesis and Exodus, and all the books of the law. In other words, the books of Lamentations, Deuteronomy, not Lamentations. Anyway, I'm going to get mixed up. But anyway, all the books of the law is what some of the older Jewish writers say, that's what's referred to as the book of Jasher. And certainly we know in the books of the law, the Lord did give instructions to the nation of Israel on how to fight. Why? Because they had been a peaceful people. They had never had to fight before. They'd lived with the Egyptians. They'd lived in Egypt. They didn't have to fight. But going into the promised land, they were going to have to fight. And so the Lord gave them instructions. He gave Joshua instructions on how to teach these people how to fight. And so David, he says, also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. In other words, teach them how to use the weapons of war. Because we're going to have to fight. Who are they going to have to fight? The Philistines. The beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places. How are the mighty fallen? Tell it not to Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Askelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Ye mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offering. For there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away, the shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they are not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Ye daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with other delights, who put on ornaments of gold upon your apparel. How are the mighty fallen in the midst of battle? O Jonathan, thou wast slain in thine high places. I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. How are the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perished? We're going to leave off reading with that, and just understand, now begins in the next chapter the story of David as king. And Saul is finished. He's died. He's along with his sons. That's the end of their story, at least on earth anyway. So we're going to stop there for tonight. Next time, we'll see where the Lord leads. We'll pick up with another study